Hello and welcome back. My name is Andrea, and on this channel what I talk about is what it's like to go from being child-free by choice, adamantly child-free by choice, until age 40 when I decided to become a mom, and not only a mom, but a stay-at-home mom. This was after being career-focused for all of my 20s and all of my 30s. On this channel, we're going to talk about what it's like to go from the transition of working woman to stay-at-home mom and the identity shifts that come along with that. What is it like to get pregnant at 40? What's it like to go through delivery at 40? And then also what we're going to talk about is just motherhood and the adjustments that come with who you are, who you become, your maturity, and your goals. So if that sounds like something that would be interesting for you, please stick around. Today, what I want to talk about is actually what it was like getting pregnant at 40, my kind of pregnancy story, and a little bit of my birth story. I'm keeping my microphone right here because I want to get up and actually show you guys my 23-week belly so I'm currently 43 years old and I am 23 weeks pregnant with my second baby. So here is my 23-week pregnancy belly. I don't know, I kind of like it. I think it's super cute. And overall, I'm very lucky. I'm having a very comfortable pregnancy overall. I still have really good energy. I don't feel like I'm limited in my ability to really do anything other than bend all the way forward because I got this big old tummy in the way. And then when I sit up and do things, I try not to use my abs because you just don't want to pull those abs apart when you're expanding so readily. So what am I going to talk about today? My pregnancy journey, the first go around. Oh, I dropped a pen. When I was 39, my husband and I had a really big heart-to-heart, and at this point we had been married for 10 years. So we got married at 29, went to premarital counseling before we got married, and then just continued it for the first 6 or 7 years of our marriage, which was one of the most powerful things that I think we could have done for ourselves. And during that time, we discussed at length, continuously, I would say at least weekly, on whether or not we should have kids. Long story short, we didn't find ourselves being in a position to be qualified. I say qualified for being a parent. Financially, we weren't ready. Relationally, we weren't ready. We were still trying to get to know each other and live with each other. And could you imagine throwing a baby into the mix? Oh my goodness, it would have crashed and burned. And then we were also just trying to work on ourselves, get where we wanted to be career-wise. So anyway, at 39, after being married for 10 years to each other, we decided that we were in a place to finally have a baby. And so what happened was we made that decision and we got pregnant relatively easily. Now, that's not the case for everyone who waits until they're 39 years old to start trying to conceive. So I realize how lucky that my husband and I are. So we were able to conceive pretty easily and naturally. And at that point, I was still working and thinking I was still going to work. But anyway, turn over because I have notes. I knew that I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know much of anything about pregnancy. But I did know that I wanted to have as natural of a birth as possible, but I didn't even know what that even meant. So when it came to picking who was going to be taking care of my obstetric care and my pregnancy care, I did pick a local midwifery group out of the local hospital. They were highly reviewed, very, very knowledgeable, and I went there for the first 36 weeks of my pregnancy. So I went there regularly. I got all my checkups. I did all the things. My blood pressure was good. My weight was good. My pregnancy was developing as it should. The only thing that made me slightly more complicated, was that I was of advanced maternal age, AMA, which is what they're using now to say instead of geriatric pregnancy. I personally like owning the term geriatric pregnancy. And geriatric pregnancy is anything over 35, but since I was 40 at the time, I wanted to be geriatric plus, like it was a badge of honor. Like, hey, I can still get pregnant and I am a geriatric plus pregnancy. So anyway, advanced maternal age. During my learning process, I guess you would say, of pregnancy, I started watching a lot of YouTubes, and I started to do a lot of homework. So one of the most influential channels that I started watching was one called Hey Shayla. If you are at all interested in some of this stuff, she's just a wonderful source of information and just encouragement. So if you're at all curious about anything like that, Hey Shayla, go check her out. But one of the things that she recommended was a book called Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. Okay, so Ina May was a midwife and one of the old school midwives, and I read her book, and the first half was mostly just birth stories, so I skipped right past it. And the second half was, what is physiologically normal childbirth? And she goes through the whole process, and it was one of the coolest things I'd ever read, and it was highly influential. And then I started watching another YouTube channel called Evidence-Based Birth. Highly recommend. They go through all of the most updated studies. They teach you about what, just everything from how to mitigate pain with water and essential oils to what are the outcomes of cesarean section, and they talk about epidurals, and they talk about Pitocin, they talk about outcomes, they talk about vaccines, they talk about everything, but it comes from research and data and the most up-to-date evidence-based medicine when it comes to pregnancy and childbirth. I watched so much of that channel. I started to feel like I started to become really educated when it came to birth, the birth process, the different phases of birth, the positions that women could birth and labor in that were the most advantageous for a successful vaginal delivery. I also started watching some really empowering YouTubes from doulas talking about all of the different ways that you can control your discomfort or pain through, mindset, and it was just a really powerful experience. So as I was going through my pregnancy and becoming more and more confident in my ability to deliver without an epidural and without Pitocin, that was my goal. Is I just didn't want any interventions. I wanted to let my body do what it was going to do naturally, and I only wanted to intervene should it become medically necessary. And being a physical therapist and understanding pain science, I felt like I had a really good grasp on the difference between pain and discomfort. And I was then able to really get my mind right and working on my mindset for a long time, saying, okay, I am ready for the discomfort that will likely come with delivery, but I know it is not dangerous, it is not damaging, it is not something to be afraid of. And because of that, I can do it, and I don't have to be afraid of the pain that might come with it. So this was my mindset. And I did also learn from evidence-based birth that the likelihood of an infection or some sort of adverse event on delivering on land versus delivering on water, in the water, were the same. And that you can use water as a really strong way to control your own discomfort. So I wanted to birth in a tub. I'm still seeing the hospital midwives. I realized that I'm going to birth at the birth center at the hospital, and they do have these teeny tiny bathtubs there, but I wanted a birth tub. So I was like, you know what? I will rent a birth tub, and I want to deliver in the bathtub, but I would also love to be in the hospital in case there's some sort of problem and they need to intervene. Like, what if I need an emergency C-section? I don't want to rule those things out. I don't want to stop myself from the opportunity of having an intervention should I need it. I mean, I've known people, friends, my mother, who have gone through a cesarean section. So it's not like it's an uncommon thing, right? Like, people get C-sections, they need them. So I keep going to the birth center, not the birth center, the hospital midwives group, and I started talking to them about, I really want to deliver in a tub. And what I started to learn is that hospital policy did not allow for that. And I said, well, okay, well, why? And they said, well, it's just the way that the hospital prefers to do it. And I go, but the research, and I could even pull up the articles because evidence-based birth makes it really easy to access the articles. I go, but the most recent evidence shows that there's not a benefit necessarily to not delivering, like to delivering on land versus water. There's not a clear benefit because the outcomes are the same. And they said, we know, but hospital's policy dictates that you are not allowed to deliver in the hospital. And are not allowed to deliver in the water at a hospital. Shoot. So I was really concerned about this. So lucky for me, I had already hired a doula who I love. And I asked her about it. And I go, I'm just really confused. I do want to be able to have the best chances of delivering without any sort of intervention. I feel like the strongest chance I have is being able to deliver in the water, but the hospital won't let me deliver in the water. I'm just really torn, even though I'm picking a midwifery group that's out of the hospital. And my doula said, Andrea, I'm going to encourage you to interview this birth center. Just go to this birth center, interview a couple of the midwives there, see if it's something you can get on board with. So around, I want to say, I can't remember, is it 32 or 36 weeks? I believe it was 32 weeks. So at 32 weeks pregnant, I went to the birth center and interviewed a midwife, and I was blown away. It was beautiful. You could go in there and it was like being in I don't know, somebody else's well put together home. There was a huge bathtub. And so anyway, I go there and I learned that not only can I deliver in the bathtub, but this particular birth center happens to be very, very close to the hospital, and they would let me work with a birth plan that I felt the most comfortable with. And so I transitioned my care from the hospital midwives to the birth center. And that was going really successfully. However, I was still going to maternal fetal medicine. So I didn't mention this before, but because I'm over 40 and I'm of advanced maternal age, they wanted to just continuously double check that, I wasn't going to collapse at any moment because I am 40 years old and pregnant, even though objectively all my numbers look good. So anyway, I'm going to maternal fetal medicine. I'm getting, I'm starting to get, I forget when, but I started getting NSTs, which are non-stress tests, which are to check the baby's heart rate. Well, on one particular visit, I went in, and whenever I went to maternal fetal medicine, I always saw a different OB, which was fine with me because I wasn't planning on delivering with an OB. But on this one particular day, the OB said, okay, you know what? We did your ultrasound, all your baby's measurements looks good. You have enough, oh my gosh, my brain is checking out. The fluid that's in your uterus. It's not cerebral spinal fluid. Oh my gosh, my brain. Anyway, you have enough fluid in your uterus. The baby is sitting there perfectly. All the measurements are great. Your blood pressure looks really good. Your heart rate looks good. You're gaining weight appropriately. And so after she got done telling me about how all of my objective measures were on point for a healthy pregnancy, she then says, well, but we do need to talk about your 39-week induction. And I go, oh, okay, thank you. I was not planning on having an induction. My goal was to have an unmedicated birth, and I wanted to go into labor naturally. So I would love to know, where is this recommendation coming from? And she looks at me and she goes, well, and she tells me about a study called the ARRIVE trial. And so I wrote it down so I could then go look it up. And then we also talked about that in my ultrasounds, my baby did have what's called a nuchal cord wrap. So that's when the umbilical cord wraps around the neck. Well, my baby had two nuchal cords. So I mean, it was wrapped around 2 times. And so anyway, this particular doctor scared the living bejesuses out of me and told me that, because she had 2 nuchal cords, that my chances of her not being able to descend were really high, and that my chances, because of my advanced maternal age, my chances of having a stillborn baby were higher. I actually pulled up her note. So I'm going to read to you the note that she wrote, which made me just unbelievably scared for myself and for my baby. So bear with me. Here it is. Okay, so I have to look off to the side, so forgive me for that. So office visit, my blood pressure was 116/68. Denies contractions or any sort of bleeding. Andrea was informed of the fetal testing results, both of the BPP and Dopplers, including AFI, were reassuring. The umbilical cord remains clearly twice around the neck. Non-stress test is pending. We discussed the increased risk for stillbirth associated with advanced maternal age, particularly when greater than or equal to 40 years of age, and how that risk can only be further increased by some unknown degree by the presence of the persistent nuchal cord. Now appears to be double loop, not loose. The stillbirth risk is the basis for both the American College of Gynecology and the SMFM, which is the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, to recommend delivery prior to the estimated date of delivery in the 39th week in the absence of other complications. The likelihood of a successful labor induction is very high at 39 weeks, but that differs from the rate of vaginal delivery of the healthy infant. The nuchal cord may or may not impede fetal descent, which may prevent a successful labor process. At this time, she is now considering delivery at a birth center where continuous fetal monitoring and operative delivery would not be available. If needed, the delay in transport may impact the timing of the delivery, further increasing the risks for poor neonatal outcomes. The non-stress tests or ongoing ongoing EFM, external fetal monitoring, is a very important element in the monitoring of the fetus as we are indirectly evaluating for fetal hypoxemia and the presence of cord compression. Tell me this isn't terrifying. It goes on. As she was not originally scheduled for her non-stress test today, she agrees to stay to have this test done. Further testing is to include non-stress tests with AFI twice weekly by maternal fetal medicine until delivery. If the non-stress test is non-reactive, a reflexive BPP would be performed. Timing and site of delivery remain her choice. I assured her that as care providers, our goals were the same as hers, for as natural a delivery as possible with the greatest likelihood of a healthy maternal and fetal outcome. All questions answered to their apparent satisfaction. So I immediately sent this note to my midwife and to my doula and said, am I still a candidate for birth center delivery? Because it looks like me and my baby, we are in danger. And so anyway, the midwife made an emergency appointment with me. My doula obviously called me and was like, go talk to the midwife. And my midwife looks at this and goes, okay, I have to tell you, I have delivered a baby with 8 nuchal cord wraps, 8 wraps around the neck. And the baby came out fine. A nuchal cord, she explained, was not necessarily an indicator for a poor birth outcome. Now, that is a highly controversial statement right now, because I know people who have had C-sections because they had a nuchal cord, because they said their baby couldn't descend. So here I am with this idea that my baby can't come out because it has 2 nuchal cords, and then my midwife who says, I'm not afraid of your baby, and we could do this. And I was like, okay. So I end up continuing my care at the through the birth center. Now, as I get my NSTs done, my non-stress test done at the maternal fetal medicine, my baby's heart rate is lower. So I wrote this down, but it says that a normal fetal heart rate is between 110 and 160 beats per minute. That's based on my quick online search. This is not my area of expertise, so if that is incorrect, feel free to correct me in the comments. And my baby's heart rate was around 120. Stayed there pretty consistently throughout because I got only 18,000 stress tests. But on one particular day, there's something called decels. So there's when your baby's heart rate drops momentarily and then pops back up and then drops and pops back up. And so I was getting this non-stress tests and my baby had some decels. They sent me to the hospital side. They admitted me. And told me that, because of the decels, they were really concerned. And this was right around late 38-ish weeks. So they put me in the hospital. They want to monitor me for a full 24 hours. They give me some special injection that's supposed to rapidly develop my baby's lungs. So that way, if I do have to deliver, even though I'm still 38 weeks, her lungs will be more developed. So that will be good for her breathing. And so I'm on the verge of tears because I'm so afraid for my baby at this point. I'm being hospitalized. They're hooking me up to continuous fetal monitoring, and I just have to wait there. And so I tell my husband, like, hey, I'm just so you know, I'm being admitted to the hospital. I'm not coming home today. And so he comes, and they just monitor my baby's heart rate. And nothing interesting happens the first full 24 hours. And so they want to keep me another day. So they keep me 2 nights at the hospital so they can monitor my baby's heart rate. And at one point I was like, well, you know what? What if it's positional? So I'm in the room, 38 plus weeks pregnant, doing lunges and squats and all kinds of things. And the nurses come running in because apparently this messes with the system, with the monitor. I go, what are you doing? And I go, well, we can't get my baby to do the decels again. And I wanted to see what's going on. So I thought, well, maybe it's positional. So I'm doing some lunges and some squats and stuff in here to see if I can recreate what happened, a couple days ago. And they go, no, the best thing you can do is to stay perfectly still in bed, and we will see if there's any decels, heart rate decelerations. So I said, okay. So I stay in that bed and I try to stay as still as possible while at the hospital to try to see if the decels will come back. They did not. So eventually one of the nurses comes in and says, well, we can't justify keeping you anymore. We do have to discharge you. And I thought that was a really interesting way of putting that, because I think what they really wanted to do was, while I was there, I think that they were wanting to induce me because of my age, and then I had the decel. But one really positive note about being in the hospital is you get to see doctors. And so I got to have some one-on-one time with an OBGYN, and I asked him, I go, hey, you know what? And he comes in, he goes, oh, I hear that you want to try to deliver in a birth center. And I go, yep, that would be really important to me. And he said that he didn't recommend it because, all of the interventions that you need at the hospital would not be there. And I said, I really appreciate you saying that, and you're absolutely right, and I agree with you. And I said, but I'll be honest, the reason I transferred my care is I really want to deliver in a bathtub. In a tub, not a bathtub, but in a tub. And that is against hospital policy here. And so what I would love to ask you is, why do you recommend that I not deliver in water? And so anyway, we had a really nice long conversation. I really appreciated him taking the time to answer my questions. And pretty much, long story short, what he had said about not delivering in a tub is that it's just not, he just didn't feel like it was as safe. That it was much safer to deliver on land. And that based on his experience, that was the better way to go. And based on his experience, more women have surprise complications, and being in the hospital makes you safer. And so I really appreciated his time. And although I listened to him based on all of the research I had done, I just didn't find it compelling. I still wanted to deliver in the bathtub or in a tub. So I get discharged, and I still have my regular appointments at the maternal fetal medicine, and I still get the non-stress tests, and I still get pretty regular ultrasounds. I got a lot of ultrasounds in my first pregnancy, but nothing unusual or abnormal or exciting came up again. So I was able to continue on, and I did end up delivering at the birth center. And I delivered at 39 weeks and 6 days, so 1 day before my due date. My labor was quick, holy moly. My first contraction was at noon, and my baby arrived on this earth at 4 p.m. So I had a 4-hour labor and delivery, and it was, although quick and kind of exciting, it was so uneventful. She came into this world, she was healthy, and she cried, and everything went the way that it was supposed to. I delivered in the water. My midwife and doula were both amazing. I had some fetal heart monitoring during, but it was not continuous. So I was able to move around and be in different positions. And I really do think there's an amnesia to when you go through labor and delivery, because I don't, or maybe because it was so fast, but I don't remember it being terrible. I remember it being uncomfortable, and there were times of discomfort, but I don't remember any sort of terrifying pain or anything like that. So anyway, so that was my pregnancy story from the first time around. And the reason that I think that I was treated so intensely was just because of my age. And there is some research out there that shows that, the outcomes are not as good the older that you are. But there's also some research out there that shows that if you give birth later in life, that you're going to live longer I'm supposed to live to 100 now because I'm going to birth a baby over 40 or something like that. So, and this is not medical advice, this is just my story. But I do think it's really important that when you're working with a care team, you just gotta ask questions, and you just gotta be confident in yourself and your body. And I just knew I was healthy, and I knew that my baby was healthy, and I had so much faith in my midwife and in my doula. And in the end, it ended up being a beautiful birth experiences. It's one of my favorite memories, actually. And it was uneventful. I mean, it was textbook. My baby did have the 2 nuchal cord wraps around her neck and a bandolier, which means one of the wraps went around her body too. So she really had 3 umbilical cord wraps around herself, and she descended. I was able to deliver her. The midwife unwrapped her nuchal cords right after delivery and handed her to me in the tub, and it was just this really beautiful experience. And so this time, because of my last experience, and I do believe that because of my age, there was some fear around that. And so I think I was overtreated, and I think I got scared a few times because of it, and I don't think that's good for me or my baby. So this time around, I am not even going to see an OB. I am only going to see a midwife. And if my midwife thinks that I need to go to the hospital or see an OB or get some sort of emergency treatment, I am absolutely going to do it, no hesitation. But I'm not going to assume that my body is broken either, because it's not, and it never was. And although I appreciate the concern and the care and the high level of skill all of my physicians had, I just think I just don't want to go through that experience the same way again. And I didn't mention much about the ARRIVE trial, but I recommend reading it. It is a study that is used to justify a 39-week elective induction. And the reason that the study says that you should do that is because they do show that your chances of a cesarean section go down slightly if you induce labor at 39 weeks. It's been quite a while since I've read the study, so I can't really review it or talk about it in any sort of, I would say, intellectual capacity. But what I will say is that I remember reading the study and I didn't find the data compelling. So I continued to pursue an unmedicated and intervention-free labor and delivery as much as possible. So that's my story. This is a particularly long video. I hope that you found it helpful. I would love to hear if you happen to be, an AMA, advanced maternal age mama, and you got pregnant and delivered. I'd love to hear your story. Did you do a birth center? Did you do OB hospital birth? Did you do midwifery hospital birth? Did you like your experience? Did you end up doing an epidural? I mean, there are so many reasons why you should have the option to absolutely do an epidural and absolutely do Pitocin. And emergencies really do come up. And so I'm not belittling any of that at all. I am just saying that you just need to be an active member of your care team, ask questions, and also listen to your own body. And just know, just don't be afraid to ask questions. So anyway, thanks for your time. I super appreciate it. I hope you found this interesting or informative. But I definitely recommend that if you are at all curious about any of this stuff, just start doing some research and some homework and start looking into things. There's some really great resources online. Again, I highly recommend evidence-based birth. I guess I would start there. Go to evidence-based birth. That's where you would get all of your data and information and studies. And then I really liked Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. I found that a very interesting book. And then I followed some doulas online, and it was good. So anyway, thanks. Have a great rest of your day.